How we doing? Nick from Beer-Gineers here for a rather different video to what we normally put on the channel. What I thought I would do is walk you through the title is a bit of a misnomer because it's not the top 10 beer and pub books ever written. It's basically my top 10. Yeah, so it's a relatively narrow sample. With that said, I have been reading about beer and pub culture and that sort of thing for quite a number of years, so I've amassed a bit of a collection. So before we get into the top 10, a couple of honourable mentions that really aren't so much to do with beer and pubs in general. This one is a really good book. It's called Proof, The Science of Booze. And there's various chapters on effectively, alcohol as a science in terms of, the evolution of it. It's really well written. It's really interesting. It goes into the science of fermentation and brewing, which, being a engineer, science nerd, I enjoy. And then it goes into a bit of sort of the biology of booze. So that is a really, really interesting read. I'd recommend that. Another one which I enjoyed, even though he's a West Brom fan, is Adrian Charles's book, The Good Drinker. Sorry, I know we've got a few sort of US watchers. It's that stupid football rivalry that we have in the UK. Our local rivals are West Brom, basically, football, soccer. Yeah. But anyway, he's a sound dude, Adrian Charles. And this book, he says in the opening chapter, this is not a book on how to stop drinking, which is a good job. Yeah. It's not a self-help book in the sense of how to stop drinking. It's basically just to do a bit of self-analysis and look to see if you need to cut back and a few tips of how to do that. But it's really, really charmingly written. It's funny. It's a really sort of good read. So irrespective of whether you think you might drink a bit too much and do you need to sort of cut it down a little bit, it's a really interesting read, really good. He talks about he weaves it in with his own story of his upbringing and his own sort of experiences of drinking, when he was younger at uni and then at work. Yeah, he's had quite an illustrious career. So yeah, that's a really good book. Right, into the top 10 of beer and pub books. So starting in reverse order, number 10, we have Craft and Arguments by Pete Brown. Now, this top 10, a bit of a spoiler alert, it's Pete Brown heavy. He's my favourite beer writer, and he has both the worst out of the top 10 and the best. Yeah, so a bit of a spoiler alert there. So this is a recent book. It's Craft and Arguments, and it's basically about the whole concept of craft beer. What is it? To be honest with you, I didn't really get on with it. I felt that it was like a magazine article that had been sort of padded out into a book. It's quite academic in places. He goes off on tangents unnecessarily. I mean, I am an academic. I teach surveying and building engineering at a university, so I'm no stranger to an academic paper. It's not that. It's just the fact that he strays off topic. Yeah, so whilst I love Pete Brown, I felt this was a bit of a padded out thing. And it felt like it was sort of tossed off over very well researched. It was research, but I don't know. I didn't feel there was a whole book in that, more sort of like an article. So that's number 10. Number 9 is a book by Steve Hindy about the craft beer revolution. So basically how it all started. Obviously, I'm not going to go into it now, but basically we have the US to thank for this. They're the ones that started this craft beer, particularly this hoppy IPA sort of craze. So it traces that back. It's a bit of a sort of a history, sort of goes back to sort of the early days of craft and how they're actually trying to replicate English real ale. And because they only had American hops, it came out how it did. So yes, that's number 9. Number 8 is a book by Adrian Jones. He's a very, very famous and well-renowned beer writer, and it is a good book. But it's slightly bitty in the sense that it is a series of essays and articles very, very short, and some poems as well, just basically all bundled together. So it's an interesting read. I did enjoy it, but you know, it's not one of my very favourites. But Adrian Jones doesn't feature very much in his collection, even though he's one of the most well-renowned ones. I've just remembered as well, I have omitted the book by Johnny Garrett from the Craft Beer channel. That was a decent book, but it was a bit sort of, there was lots of pictures in it, and I got through it really quickly. It was good, but for the money I paid for it, there wasn't much to read in it. Lots of pictures, basically. I liked something that's gonna absorb me and take a bit of while to get through. Empire of Booze by Henry Jeffries. This is quite funny, interesting sort of history and, you know, different cultures, wine, that sort of thing. Yeah, so it's like I say, again, it's not particularly beer and pubs, but it's an interesting. It does include beer and pubs to an extent, but also things like wine and rum and bourbon and that sort of thing. In at number, how many have we got through? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In at number 6, we've got Shakespeare's Local. This is another book by Pete Brown, and it is it's about pub culture, but it's like it's through the lens of the George pub in London, where apparently, you know, Shakespeare, you know, used to frequent. So it's a bit of a history / cultural look at pub culture over hundreds of years and how the George itself has evolved in that time. So a very interesting read. In at number 5. We've got Miracle Brew. I've lost a problem with these nice hardcover books. I've lost the glossy cover off it. So this is another Pete Brown book, and there's a chapter on barley. There's a chapter on the water. There's a chapter on hops. There's a chapter on yeast. It's really good. I'd recommend that if you want to know more about the science of and the art of brewing beer. Basically, that is. So I learned quite a lot from reading that. So whether you are just interested in beer, the science of brewing, or if you are a brewer and you want to know a bit more about the science behind it, that's a good one. In number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I'm just looking how many we've got. We've got 3 Sheets to the Wind. So this is a travelogue by Pete Brown, where he effectively he travels around the world drinking beer in different cultures, different countries. 300 bars in 13 countries. Yeah, so it's like a beer travelogue. It's really, really interesting read. Really funny. Really, really well written. I love Pete Brown. In at number 3, we've got Search for the Perfect Pub by Paul Moody and Robin Turner. And as you can see, it's called Looking for the Moon Underwater. So that mythical pub by George Orwell. So it goes into that. So again, it's another sort of travelogue, but just in the UK, basically. It's about pub culture, basically. Like I say, it's a really interesting read. Second, the Silver Award, we have, and this is a beautiful book. It's just called The Pub by Pete Brown, and this is a mix of. It's beautifully illustrated. It's a guidebook basically to pubs throughout England. I think it's just England, and there's chapters on historical pubs. There's chapters on modern pubs. Chapters on architecturally interesting pubs. Yeah, so it starts off like that. And then it goes into his recommendations throughout the UK. So we've got pictures, we've got, and he rates them effectively by, food, beer, location, quirkiness, that sort of thing. So they've all got a rating and a recommendation. And we actually planned, did I tell Jane about this? One of our sort of holidays a few years ago was partially planned around this, basically. We went to a few pubs on his recommendation. And well received they were. So whether the family knew about that, I don't know. They like the pubs, that's the most important thing. But I got the tips from Pete Brown's book. And then at number 1, I've had to give it to this one, Hops and Glory, another Pete Brown book. And this is there's two sides to this. So equally, it's all about the history of the India Pale Ale, the IPA. And interwoven with that is another travelogue. So essentially, what he tries to do is recreate the voyage of the IPA. So effectively, he brews a beer specifically, to the IPA style in Burton. Then he travels by clipper ship, like a modern recreation of that to India, effectively, just to see what it's like at the end and experience it. So I won't spoil it by telling you what happened on that journey. It was eventful. But if you're interested in craft beer, if you're interested in IPA, the origins of it, that sort of thing, this is a fantastic book. So there we are. There is Nick Gineers' top 10 beer books. Like I say, it's a pretty narrow sample. It's very peat brown heavy. But yeah, there's some good reading there. So I do recommend you check some of those titles out. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Cheers.